In this video, I will demonstrate how to create 3 different types of button hovers using Figma. The buttons will start off with very basic animations, and towards the end of the video, they will become more complicated. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Okay, so before we get into the video, I do have a link in the description which gives you access to the Figma file that I'm using for this video. But if you do want to start from scratch, that's totally fine as well. So the main thing is really the colors. So if you're wondering, here are the colors here. So we have one for the background and also the 3 colors themselves. If you're starting from scratch, if you're wondering how I actually got this canvas up, what you want to do is come over to this icon here, the frame icon. And then if we go into phone, for this video, I'm using the iPhone 14 Plus. So you just click on that. And then that's how you create a frame. But since I've already created it, I'm not going to do that for this video. So the first thing you want to do is come over to this rectangle icon here. And we want to drag it out onto our canvas just like so. Put it somewhat in the middle. And then the next thing we want to do is to set the width and height itself. So the width for this button will be 300 and the height will be 80. Perfect. And we'll put that in the middle. We also want to set the border radius to 100. And we also want to get rid of the fill and add in a stroke with a weight of 5. And we want to change the color to a red, so we know that it's the first button that we're working with. So once you've got this cool looking shape going on here, the next thing is to add some text. And let's call it hover me. Set the text align to center. Drag it in the center, just like so. And we want to change the fill to a red as well. Cool, that's starting to look really good. The next thing we can do is we can group this. And what I might do is over here, I'll call it button 1. And what I might do is copy and paste it multiple times. And we'll call this one button 2. And then finally this one here as button 3. But since we're not working with those quite yet, I'm just going to turn them off. Okay, cool. So once you've done that, just click on the button and then come over to this icon here. What this does is it creates a component so we can reuse it as many times as we want. So we'll click on that. We want to add in a variant. And by doing so, we have an effect for what it looks like without hovering. And then we also have a way for us to style it and to tell the browser what we want it to look like when it's hovering. So what we can do when it's not hovering, we want to call it false so we know that it's not hovering. And when it is hovering, being hovered rather, we want to set it to true, just like that. Cool. And what we can do now, since it's a component, we can drag it out of the canvas and we can put it back in. I'll show you how to do that later in the video. So now what we can do is we can go into our hover effect and we can start to stylize the button itself. All right, so let's start off by adding in a fill of red. And with the text, let's give it a tan so it blends in with the background here. All right, cool. So once you've done that, all you need to do is come over to the prototype section here. And what you'll notice is you'll have these 4 little plus signs. All you need to do is drag one of them and place it into the button that we want to change it to. So once you've done that, all you need to do is instead of on tap, we want to change it to while hovering. We want to change it to the second property, which is this one here. And since this is the basic button animation that we're working with, we want to create a dissolve effect. So we just click on that. And then under here, we want to set the animation to ease in and out, and also the time to about 500 milliseconds. Perfect. So once you've done that, what you can do now, since we create a component out of it, come into the assets icon here. And what you can do is just drag it onto the canvas like so. So what we can do now is we can actually test it out. If you want to test it out, just click on this plus here, but I've already done that. So we'll come over here. This is how it's looking so far. Awesome. That's looking really, really nice. So that's the first button. So with this second button, what we can do now is we can turn on our button 2 and we want to change the color of this so that we know which button it is. So we'll change it to this light blue color. Again, change the text like so. So with this one, what we can do is we can start to use a method using masks. So the way that masks work is it allows us to create layers and be able to hide it within a certain shape. So what we want to do now is to come over to our rectangle here we want to copy and paste it. And we want to name it mask, like so. So with this mask, what we can do is we want to add a fill and we'll give it the same color as it was. And what we want to do is holding shift, make sure that all of these are highlighted. You want to right click and then come over to this here. It says use as mask. So what's happened now is this bottom icon is used as a mask. And what we can do now is we can copy and paste the rectangle again, change it to the color that we want. And what we can do now is we can actually put it in a section where we want to give it some animation. So for this button, when it's hovered, I want it to create this really cool animation transition where it slides in on the x-axis. So I think that'll look really cool. So what we can do is put it to the side so that it's hidden. And once you've done that, what you need to do is click on the button itself, come over to this icon here, which creates the component, the exact same thing that we did before. We also want to create another variant when it's hovered. So for the first one, we want to call it false when it's not being hovered. And for the second one, we want to set it to true, just like so. And again, we'll drag it over to here. Perfect. So the next thing you want to do is go into that rectangle that we created here, drag it out to the center. And with the hover me text, we want to change it to the background, which was the tanned color, which is this one here. Perfect. So once you've designed that, the next thing we can do is again go into the prototype, drag it into here, do the exact same thing. But instead of doing dissolve, we want to change it to smart animate. And what this does is it will allow us to move shapes whilst also giving it some animation. And again, rather than on tap, we want to make sure that's hovering, make sure it's set to change to with the smart animate. And again, I'll just leave it to ease in and out with 500 milliseconds. Awesome. So let's have a look at how this goes. So I'll just chuck that in the center roughly, and we'll go into here. That looks really, really nice. So that is the second button animation. And for the final one, it's pretty much the exact same technique that we did with the mask, but we're using more unique shapes to give it some interesting animation. So what I'll do now is I'll turn on our button 3 here. And what we can do is again, change the color to a different color. So we know which button it is. I'm just going to give it a blue color. And for the stroke itself, I'll give it a blue so that now we know which button is which. So the next thing we can do is we can start to create some unique shapes to it. But before doing that, I might create a mask like what we did before. Make sure it's at the bottom layer here. I'm going to change the fill to a blue. I'll just turn that off for now. And for this tutorial, I'm just going to give it some really cool shape. So maybe like a wavy shape like this. Let's play around with something like this, perhaps. Maybe. Doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as you have a shape that really looks interesting. And again, we want to change it to the color that we're working with, not the stroke. We want to change it to a fill, just like this. What I might do is by hitting on K, we can resize things. And then we hit on V again, we can decrease the size. Hopefully that fits. Yeah, that fits. I might make it a bit bigger. Cool. So this vector is now part of button 3. So now what we can do is we can go into our mask again, holding shift, highlight all of these, right click, and then we want to click on use as mask. So now we have this really cool animation shape that we can add to the hover effect, which looks really, really cool. So what I might do now is I'll hide it, click on the button itself, click on create component. We also want to add a variant. We want to set the first property to false for when it's not being hovered. And then also for this one, we want to set it to true, just like that. And what we can do now is just drag it out of the canvas here. And we can start to style the hover effect. All right, so with that vector that I created, perhaps we can move it like this, maybe rotate it a bit, stretch it out perhaps so it moves You can be really experimentative with it. It doesn't really matter how it looks. All that matters is what it looks like whilst it's being hovered. That looks good. And then come over into the text itself. So this one here, and we want to change the color to the tan color that we had. Perfect. So that's pretty much the third button styled. All you need to do now is go into the prototype. Again, drag out an arrow into this button here that we create as the variant. We want to set it to change to while hovering. Set it to smart animate, and we'll set it to 500 milliseconds. So hopefully that should work. What we can do now is we can drag button 3 onto the canvas. Let's see how this looks. That looks really, really good. What I might do is I noticed that the animation was a bit too fast. Perhaps we change it to something like 800 milliseconds. Let's see how that looks. That looks really, really cool. So that's basically the video. I hope you guys learned something. And if you need any advice on like how to improve it, or if you're struggling with certain things, please let me know in the comments. I'd be more than happy to help you out. And I will catch you guys in the next video. See you later.